And today, we're going to look at what the difficulties are. I'm sure all of you have many of them. We may come up with some that you don't know, but I'm sure you've dealt with them over your long careers. Hopefully we'll provide some tools or some tips or some hints on how to navigate those challenges. And I don't know why it's going ahead of me. There must be some timing in here for some reason. So I'll try to not let it time itself. So also we want to talk about the process to engage students in the administration to achieve the best outcome for all. So some of the tools and how to make sure that the LTSs get involved early and often. Okay, so in the chat, so if you guys can put in the chat, what are some issues that you've faced? So if you can just summarize, because I'm going to read these quickly, but we can all see kind of things that you've thought of. We've got some case studies later. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're different. And if we see something that we all want to talk about, we can split in groups and talk about those as well. So in the chat, just put the issues that you've had to deal with in the past with your students. Maybe the student has learning difficulties, maybe the student is not nice to you, or maybe the student is things like that. So a quick summary, throw into the chat. What kinds of issues have you had to deal with in the past?
Molly, I don't see. Okay, all right, I see it now. Thank you. Chat.
So we've got a couple coming in real fast. Having, so don't know study skills, don't do homework. I think it's a tired student. Yeah, so sometimes it's time constraints, sometimes it's fatiguing. Someone's talking, Alon's talking about FSI. Weak performing students, defensiveness, yeah. So some people maybe some insecurity issues, or, you know, students that are used to being right in their own profession or in a very different environment, that can happen. Not studying is common. Disruptive can be a wide range of things. Dyslexia, that's a different set of problems altogether. Sometimes they're just slow learners with memory issues. We work a lot with the military, so sometimes you get some trauma, some severe head trauma issues where they actually have a cognitive problem. So we've seen that a couple of times. Blind, I've never seen a blind student, but that is very challenging. Sorry, Lori, I didn't know you guys ever had students with that many issues. And being late, so yeah, just being on email too. Christine is talking about being praised by other teachers, maybe other teachers kind of giving them a lot of praise, but maybe you don't think they're doing quite as well as the other teachers think they are. So, okay, great. Motivation issues, yeah. So hopefully we'll cover a lot of these, and of our case studies that we're using, some of the stuff will come up, but if there's another issue that you also want to discuss, feel free to bring it up when you're in your groups. Okay, so we're going to go through, yeah, PTSD is also an issue, or lack of interest. Oh yeah, and not interested in topics and things like that you're using. So to move forward, just to go through something to keep in the back of your mind, because you guys are you love languages. You guys are probably, this is your dream job, is to learn another language, but not everybody is that way. They didn't join the military necessarily to learn a language, or they didn't join, you know, to be a diplomat to learn a language, but they have to. So it can be very frustrating. And even for all of us who love it, it's frustrating. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that your student's probably always frustrated just because it's hard to not be able to communicate. Another thing, it's also very difficult to spend time with anyone. So even, especially now, even, you know, spending this much time with my husband, which is, you know, 8 hours a day, I'm not used to that. That causes its own problems. So even the people we choose. So congratulations to those of you who can spend 6 hours a day with a person that they didn't even choose to do it. Can be hard. And students are human. You know, they're also irrational and emotional, and they also get hungry, they also get tired. We all do. So understanding that, you know, people are moody and trying to forgive moodiness as much as you possibly can. And this kind of goes back to, you're never going to get along with every person. So sometimes it's a personality conflict, and that just happens. So keep in mind that we do have strategies to work, but you know, you're never going to get along with everyone. Oops. Also, remember, you can't control that person. You can only control your reactions to that person. So if that person is going to be who they are, if they're demanding, if they're defensive, if they're insecure, or whatever those things are, whatever your student is, you know, you can only control how you react to it and come up with different tools how to manage your own kind of reactions. And lastly, we never expect any of our teachers, employees, you guys work for us, we're here to take care of you. We have HR departments. Like, this is, you are not expected to compromise your values. So that is like, if your value is compromised, then that's a deal breaker for that class. So very quickly, just two things on day, or three things on day one. Something that you can kind of do to help yourself get ahead of some things, because you don't know who you're walking in with. Make sure you do establish clear rules from the beginning, clear guidelines, clear expectations, and maybe, you know, start off as pretty strict until you know if that person, where they fall along the follow the kind of rules. So if you set clear guidelines, and you know, you can become more flexible. But if you come in and you actually start off the class very flexible, they may take advantage of it. So you can also co-create the rules. So have an open conversation in English. If they are zeros too, you don't have to speak the language to co-create classroom rules. Make sure they all agree, or if it's 2 or 3, they all agree. If it's just you and your student, you can kind of establish that. And also, you know, establish your authority. You know, we all want to come in and seem humble and things like that, but make sure you're seen as the authority so they don't end up kind of walking over you, or, you know, try to take control of the classroom, because it is your classroom. You guys dictate a lot of what goes on. It's a student-centered environment, but they're not really the boss. And then also maintaining your positive professional relationship. I know it's really hard. That friendship line is really thin, especially because a lot of you are one-on-one, but trying to keep that balance and be, you know, maybe after the class, you can become closer friends or continue the relationship or whatever, but try to keep that line clear that I'm not your friend, I'm actually working here. So that can be hard to do. Managing debates and discussions carefully. You know, we all have opinions, and we also, very hard in this situation, because in a level 3, you do have to push and give arguments and all of that without offending anybody. So some things you can do is just say, hey, I might step on some strong opinions here before you actually start the discussion. Also watching your students, especially online, because you've got fatigue, moodiness, hunger, kind of check their energy levels at certain times of days. Take breaks when you can, so you don't get, everybody gets hangry sometimes. And then pay attention to what activities are really fatiguing the student and which ones energize them. So if they are kind of a physical learner, you know, have them go for a walk or something and do audio while they're doing that. So sometimes people just can't sit for that long and need a different stimuli to energize them a little bit. And then always reflect on your approach. And then finally, don't take anything personally. Sometimes it seems very personal, but you guys are all very, you know, you're professionals. Maybe the student isn't acting professionally, but, you know, do what you can to stay, like, not be offended by what happens in the classroom. The one thing before we start on case studies is I want to talk a little bit about unethical behavior, because this is a totally different thing. So when we're talking here, we're talking about 2 lines. One is behavior that's annoying. The other one is behavior that is flat out wrong. So that's a legal issue and it's an HR issue. So we really need it to be reported. So if you feel like somebody's done something unethical, it needs to be reported and documented, like very clearly, time, date, things like that. So we can't do anything about it unless we have documentation. The possible issues, the things that are racist, sexist, anything that's derogatory, it could be related to your ethnicity, it could be related to your national origin. If it's anything that's like comes out of sexual harassment, I know different countries have different ideas of what this means, but we're in the US and it is pretty, it's pretty clearly defined. So make sure that if you feel uncomfortable, it's always reported and documented. It could be a culturally offensive language, so kind of back to your ethnicity. It also could be an erratic behavior. So it could be where the student may have actually some kind of psychological problem, which may not be a legal issue, but could also, put you in danger. We don't want that to happen. So make sure those things are documented so we can go to the client and do something about it. So if in doubt, if you're like, did that cross the line? I'm not sure. If it's creeping up against the line, just make sure you write it down. So if in doubt, just write it down. It can be a notebook. It can be an email to yourself. Just put the time and date stamp. You don't have to share it with a student, just note it. So memories change really fast. And if you don't put exactly, it becomes, the longer you wait, the longer it's like the telephone game. It changes in your memory. The other one is make sure as soon as something happens, contact your LTS and your or Natalia, who's our HR rep, so they know exactly what happened. And again, as much documentation, it's got to all be in writing, whatever. If the student's written something to you, you would pass over to the student. So anyway, this isn't most of the cases, but it has happened in the past. So please make sure like you do document anything that you find that crosses the line. Okay, so now we'll move out of this like unfortunate situation. Oh, but my reminder is keep calm and document everything. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about our first case study, and we're going to do this as a whole group. After we go through this one, we're going to talk, we're going to break up and do a couple other case studies. So this is a very common one. It's the student in charge, AKA maybe the bossy student. So we're all adults and these are professional adults. So they do feel like I'm in control. But certain people have dominant personalities and want to take control in your class. And sometimes they reject the material or whatever you've prepared, or they're telling you, I want to use this book, not the book that you've chosen or the school has chosen. Sometimes they might pressure you to bend the rules or allow like an early departure, late cancellation. So it could be both academically a little bit bossy or, controlling your break time and saying, oh, I don't want to take a break now, but you as a teacher is in charge of the break. So what are some things that you guys, Simona was saying something about reporting to your LTS. Okay. So what do you guys think? Has anybody ever had a student like this? A kind of bossy, controlling student? No? Oh, Diana, you're lucky.
I can say that he was bossy, but the student asked to go to a topic of his interest, which was, let's say, politics, and he was not ready to go to the higher level because he could hardly speak about simple topics. And I thought we reached a compromise. I told him, like, we're gonna read some news and listen to some topics regarding politics, but you still need to focus on the skills, speaking skills on these topics, because this is how the test starts with simple topics, and this is how you progress. But I could tell that he was just reluctant to do the assignments.
Yeah. So you dealt with it by kind of educating him on how language training should work.
I tried to persuade him that that's the right way to progress.
Okay, go ahead.
For instance, I had students that, not exactly dominant, but they felt like they were stronger in the matter, and they probably they knew more than the others. And what I did is I tried to divide that participation. So I let them speak and say something, and then I will ask the opinion to the other students. And then I will go back to the student, and I kept them trying to make it into an interaction in matter of questions and answers and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
In matter of the material, yes, I had in the past some people complaining about the material given, but in my case, it was handed by other professors. So I says, okay, if you have any suggestion for another material that we could use, yeah, open to that. But also, this is the book that you got, and we have to use it for now. And then later on, we can add some other books that you will be more comfortable or you would like to explore more than the other ones. So
Yeah,
I
being
tried to
open,
make it into
being a little bit flexible on the materials, but telling
Yeah.
them, you know, making sure they understand where it's coming from and maybe see the bigger
Exactly.
picture.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
that's
an
a matter
interesting
of
thing,
material.
yeah, kind of an interesting thing about how you dealt with the class with 3 people and did that. What something you can do is actually make that student the teacher, because by being the teacher, they actually have to listen to the other students.
Yeah.
Because
And
they're
then,
asking the questions, so then you force participation on the other person. So.
exactly. So I force the participation, and then I make sure to correct everybody more or less at the same pace. So even though the other person knew a little bit more, we realize that there are certain things that they have to correct. That's my ideal way of doing it.
Yeah, does anybody have any other tips? You can either put them in the chat or you can pop up and speak.
I actually had cases at FSI where I had students who simply refused to do their assignments I gave them. And some of them like, all right, okay, if you don't want to do it in class, please do it at home. And I had a case where I reported it to the LTS. The LTS spoke to the student. A few days later, the student retaliated against me.
That's not a good situation.
Yeah, that was it's something like at least in FSI you run into time to time. You have underperforming students who get very defensive, like something bothers them. Either they don't like the material or they know they're in trouble, so they look to project their frustration on somebody.
Yeah. It could be maybe insecurity of being that weak and not wanting to be in that situation. Yeah, I think when you have a non-performing student, but if it's a time issue or you see they're not responding to those activities, you know, you can maybe be a little bit flexible or let them make their own activity for other students or something like that. You know, well, if you want to do this so badly, here, you can make the activity.
Yeah, I had similar issue. I had a student who was doing only the activities that he or she liked, but never other activities. Like
so,
cooking.
How did you deal with that?
It was hard, yeah, let's say like that, because I was trying to make more the activities that he or she liked, but sometimes it was just didn't work out basically.
Yeah, because they lose out on important skills if they only
if they don't want to practice grammar, if they only want to do what they're fun for them, then
yeah. Simona, were you going to say something?
Yes, just I wanted to bring up the fact that sometimes, like when students are refusing or rejecting some activities that you're presenting, one way that I've seen the situation being solved is opening up the behind the scene of the activity to the student, making them understand why you're doing that activity, what are they gonna get out of it. Sometimes as teachers, kind of like also to go faster in during class, we're just saying like, okay, now we're gonna do this. So by adding because this is gonna have you practice these aspects that you've been struggling with, or to reinforce this type of vocabulary, then it's kind of like, it helps them digest even an activity that they are not a fan of.
Yeah, thank you, Simona. It's very helpful what you're saying. It used to be working all the time. I was doing the thing that you were you are proposing, but with this student particular didn't work out because there was, I think, other issues involved.
Mm.
So the student could not really continue in the program.
Yeah, has anybody ever had to deal with these things as well, that they thought they might have a good solution?
I do want to add something, you know, as a language training manager at DLS, we really understand how difficult the situation our teachers are in, because on one hand, it's your livelihood. If you complain, you may lose the student, then you don't have a class, you know? And so maybe a lot of times teachers tend to just feel like, okay, I'm gonna resolve it myself. I'm gonna try, I'm gonna suffer silently, or I'm gonna accommodate, you know, without any boundary or limitations, and until things explode. All of this case and the rest of the training, you know, we can talk and talk, but I think the bottom line is you as an instructor need to kind of maybe, you know, ask yourself, you should know yourselves better. Like, you look at a situation, you should ask yourself, okay, can I really handle it? Can I really, or maybe this is just a case that personality clash, no matter what you do, it's just miserable and you don't want to deal with it. Say something early on so that we don't get to that explosion where somebody cries, somebody walks out of the classroom, and then the LTSs will be like, oh, then what are we going to do? That awkwardness. Because if you say something early on, there's always a solution, even if it means the solution is, okay, we'll break the class, we'll do something else, because the sooner you get out of a tough situation, you know, the sooner you might get another very pleasant student. So I do want to encourage people to you know, increase that self-awareness and really know that at DLS, all the language training managers, we really always just support our teachers as much as we support our students. So not all customers are right.
Yeah, and just to add on is, even if it's just brainstorming with your supervisor, or brainstorming with a colleague, or venting, that's also fun too. Sometimes once you get it out, and it helps to say it out loud and help to think through problems with other people. Anybody have any other thoughts about this? Yeah, and Lori, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Lori mentioned on day one, and tell them that you can get in trouble, you know, by not following some of the guidelines, letting them know that. I have someone raising their hands, but I can't tell who it is because it just says iPhone. So if you raised your hand, feel free to chime in.
Hi, that was probably me. My name is Alexandra, and I am a new teacher for this company, although I have experience with different companies and I have taught a language in the past. And I've been listening to all those comments, and the only thing I can add to it, what I've done in the past, was I always had, you know, you always have people who might have a strong opinions, and I try not to take those opinions personally to affect me. I always ask, well then explain, why do you feel that way? What is the reasoning behind it? Or, you know, depending on the topic, obviously, I try to elaborate from their opinion and their state of mind. This way we can talk about, you know, we can expand the vocabulary by doing it. But I don't take sides, oh, you're right, or you're wrong, or you're completely wrong, whatever the reason is. We just talk about, and it's a discussion that we've had in the past. And, you know, depending on the topic, if it's a politics or if it's, you know, something medical and they want to talk about it and how things work, or how it affects them, or whatever the topic is, we elaborate on the topic, and the conversation comes, starts in one point and then can take us somewhere else. But they talk, and that's the reason for level 3 is for them to expand the vocabulary, to use their opinion, either right or wrong or left or right, doesn't matter. But they have, they practice. Isn't that the purpose for teaching the language on this level?
Yeah, so you can definitely do that at, use those kinds of discussions at a level 3. Again, but if you have a student who's a level 0+, you'd obviously have to switch to English, which makes it hard because it's not, most of our teachers' native language is not English either. So you've got 2 issues there. You either use their second language or you use your second language, which puts you kind of in a more vulnerable position if you're not using your native language when you have an open discussion like that too. So
Alexandra, by the way, welcome.
Part of this is, a lot of this is just discussion and talking about things openly.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I'm just going to move on to some of the suggestions and we'll go break out and you can talk further about this one or you can switch to the other one. But we have, with the LT team, we just kind of brainstormed some thoughts of what you could do in this situation. So your demanding student, bossy student might not always be a bad thing because it's a chance to kind of co-create or collaborate with the student. Have them do some of your work, kind of going back to what Alon said, have them do the, set up the activity that they want to do, have them decide on the role play, things like that. So try to push it student-centered while still being the authority. And then just be open to new resources. Maybe they do have a really good book and you can use it as a supplement, and most students have some budget. So you could blend some of their resources in or have them do it for homework, always assign something from that or whatever. So we talked about collaboration. Yeah, and I think this is what, I think it was Alexandra said, asking students to find out more about their strong opinions. This may be in English, oh, why do you like that activity? Why do you like activity? And back to Valentina, like maybe try to find a happy medium where they're doing a lot of what they like, but try to balance it out. Also, you can ask your LTS too. I think most of the last suggestion we have here is ask your LTS. And then when they're asking you to do things that are against DLS policy, I think this goes back to making sure that you establish the rules from the beginning, reiterate to the student that DLS has policies and blame it on DLS. You know what I mean? Late cancellation, it's not your problem, guys. This is the policy. The government has agreed to it. It's the way they fund the contract, and this is what every government contract has this, any government language training contract has this in there. So it's a don't even step over the line kind of thing. They sign a document when they come in, they know they signed the document that LTS told them the rule. So it's not, for teachers, it's not, our policies are not your problem. Just send them to me or the LTS or to the HR manager. And we'll go back to the person who pays because usually it's not them. So anyway, okay. So we did case study 1. Okay, case study 2. I think Simona's group was supposed to talk about this. I don't know if Simona or one of her group members wants to jump in and tell us, kind of summarize what you guys talked about.
Sure, I took notes so I can share with everybody. So our case study, as you can all read, it's a very simple one. It happens less often because at DLS most of the classes are one-on-one, but we have most of us might have taught small groups like 2, 3, or 4 students, and we were discussing about who normally complains, like the low-level student or the more advanced student, and I was sharing with the teacher that I've seen it all. So all students, from their perspective, they either feel they're rushed and they kind of like feel guilty about interrupting and slowing down the class, versus like more advanced students feel bored sometimes and feel they're wasting time, and that if they were one-on-one they could go so much faster. So from a more administrative aspect, I shared with the other teachers the fact that depending on the program, sometimes if the issue it's a real issue, like if the difference in the levels, it's really big and it's really hard for you to teach such a class, no matter how much differentiated instruction you do, come talk to your LTS, because some programs allow us to offer relief on your pain or the student's pain, that might be through splitting the class or might be through offering some one-on-one time to one of the students.
Or removing the student, which we don't want to do, but it can happen.
The other thing was, of course, we talked about differentiated instruction. So by adapting activities, it came out the fact that sometimes if the only issue among students is the difference in level, but if they get along and with the personality and in the class, there is like a good atmosphere anyway, even if the levels are different, that's a big difference for you as a teacher, because the students are more willing to compromise, are more willing to help each other, and are more understanding in general. So by creating activities where they need to collaborate and they need to work together, sometimes from the beginning, from the get-go, you're kind of creating that that's a kind of like good group atmosphere in the class. And the other point was that teachers brought up the fact that sometimes they were approached by students during a break, but kind of like one-on-one on this fact and on why they were bothered. Sometimes it was just to ask for extra materials during self-study to do more advanced things, or to review more things, or to ask for help simply. So that's a good thing. And if that doesn't happen, I recommend that could be a good thing also from you to approach a student that you see maybe is upset and is unhappy, and approach them one-on-one to talk to them and see if they open up, or otherwise also come to see us, come to see the LTS, and sometimes we can do a class observation to kind of like see with our eyes how big of a difference there is. And sometimes we can approach the student just very indirectly, but kind of like to get a feeling about how are they doing, and just by starting the conversation like that, then sometimes again they open up and they tell us in which way they're frustrated, and that might be the starting point for us to solve the problem. And yes, and regarding the one-on-one attention, a teacher brought up the fact that we sometimes, even if we don't have allocated time to split the class or to work one-on-one, you end up doing it by, let's say, if you're teaching DLI, it's semi-autonomous time. Or if it's not a DLI class anyway, it's maybe a break or a slower type of activity, or maybe some students finished faster, and so you assign to them a different activity while you work one-on-one with a student who is slower. So you're kind of giving those moments of one-on-one attention during your class time. And that was pretty much it. Molly, you're muted.
Yes, just testing that you were listening to me. So did anybody else discuss this particular case in their group? I think
yes, our group did as well. We had Simona G there, Dudley, and Yi, one of our instructors. So yeah, we definitely, it was very interesting to talk about this. And we do agree that in some cases it's possible to separate the classes or not. So what we do have to add probably is, as Dudley pointed out, sometimes depending on your dynamic in the group, it's helpful to have one student helping the other student, or a couple of other students. I had a similar situation once when I had 3 of them teaching, but again, you have to tread very carefully there, I think, not to kind of like step on anybody's toes, but there are certain situations when that would work. And of course, the differentiated approach is another thing which puts a lot of work on the instructor as well, but giving them that individual time during the sessions, and also differentiate homework to try and even out the levels is something that could be employed. And of course, if you have a student who, or a couple of students, as our instructor pointed out, who started at the same level, but they're progressing differently because one of them is very, very hardworking and comes always 100% prepared, and the other one is not. The other one, you know, takes leave and kind of does not want to do homework. Then it's, you know, there's got to, you could offer that student who is weaker and ends up being weaker to start doing certain tasks, and when they say, well, they cannot, then hand those tasks over to the other student who is stronger, but it only if it's based on homework, so that they kind of like see in the subtle way that if they come unprepared, then they cannot really benefit fully as the other student can. And this was our contribution. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks, Katya. Did any other groups talk about this one?
Our group did. Really, it's what we focused on, and what we noticed is that personal qualities of students in the group classroom can sometimes cause problems within the joint goal of learning together. So things that came up included if there's a professional hierarchy that is in competition among the group, that can cause some issues. So for example, if one student's a lieutenant versus a captain, and then also some competitive government subculture habits bleeding through. So students coming from Army or Marine Corps, that too can lead to some tense moments. But the instructors described setting the tone of expected behavior. So making sure that from the start, it's understood that we're maintaining respect no matter the hierarchy, and then also recording patterns of behavior. So not needing to fix everything on one's own. Share with the LTS, know that there are methods to report problematic behavior without causing any long-term repercussions. So those came up during our discussion.
Yeah, and I think one we were going to talk about, we took out, was having a lot of you guys have a husband and wife, the spouse and sponsor situation. And those, you can get into couples counseling and all kinds of things when that happens. So, okay, I think we have a breadth of kind of issues and suggestions. I'll kind of give you our thoughts on, you know, what we were thinking about. Making sure that you do an evaluation of the different levels, because sometimes it's one specific thing that's holding the person back, or, you know, make sure you kind of do a diagnostic assessment quite often to see where you can plug in more information for the weaker student. And also, like Simona said, you can consult with your LTS, and sometimes you can split. Especially if you've taught DLI. I think, Federica, you've definitely had this happen to you recently, where the weaker student has to go through a performance plan and things like that. So if it is a significant difference, you know, a lot of the agencies have specific strategies to fix that, and we have to do, you know, the proper assessments, and your LTS is there to help you with that. And then differentiated learning, a lot of you guys talked about this. Peer-to-peer work, if they're forced into the group, they feel then they have to perform. You know, if it's comfortable, unless you have a bad dynamic, you know, you play on the stronger student, let them, you know, be the teacher for a while, you know, as long as it doesn't hurt the other person's feelings. Usually we're all adults, we can handle, like, yeah, I'm the weaker student, it's fine, and make them feel fine about it. It just happens. Using task-based teaching can help, because they can each do different tasks. So they do their tasks separately, and one produces a page and the other one produces 3 pages. It doesn't matter, you can evaluate both, you know. And I think Katya was saying, use individualized homework or semi-autonomous work for those of you that have those hours. And then, you know, make sure you talk to students and get their input openly, and no one should feel bad at being bad at learning languages, because it's hard. So, you know, some people are a bit better than others. So trying to take the shame out of not being the stronger student. So, okay, great. I have Valerie here as this one. Valerie, I don't see her in my view, but if you want to speak up, Valerie, what your group talked about. Is she here?
She is on mute. Valerie?
Oh, you're still on mute.
Sorry, we talked about another one. We talked about those teachers, students bad-mouthing some other teachers.
Oh, you didn't talk about this one.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody else did.
Did anybody talk about case study 3?
We talked about this with Mercado Sensei and Tamim and Holly. Mercado Sensei, you had a lot of good inputs. You want to share? Where is she?
I don't see Mercado Sensei, but Mercado's, there she is.
Well, yeah, but Christina can explain better. So,
Tamim, do you want to go?
You're the boss.
Christina, you can summarize.
Okay. So so Mercado Sensei mentioned about when explaining grammars, if the student pushed back saying, "Oh, my previous teacher said this and that differently," so she said it is important to explain to the student, look, there are so many different factors why we might have different explanation, or we might have different preference over certain grammar structures or even vocabulary choices. So she sometimes will joke with the student, oh, look, your previous teacher maybe is younger. And for me, for my age, this is how we say that. Or, I'm from the Southern Japan. In the Southern Japanese area, people usually use this structure or that structure. So I think I like her way of making the explanation more like a very friendly way to solve this, instead of saying, oh no, the other teacher's explanation is wrong, mine is right. So I think use the soft way is very helpful. So Tamim also mentioned something. Tamim? Oh, he's also not here.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I
So
think we had to leave.
Oh, so Tamim also shared a couple good ideas, and but I feel like all in all, our group most thing we talked about is to not try to fight over who's right, who's wrong. Instead, explain to the student there are a lot of varieties, and if the answer is not clear, always tell the students, oh, that's a very interesting point. You know what, let me research a little bit more, or let me talk to the Japanese teaching team or the Chinese teaching team, and then I'll get back to you. So I think that will make it in front of students, it will make the teaching team feel very unified and very friendly, instead of start that kind of the battle mode. So yeah, mostly we talked about this.
Yeah, and is that my, sorry, my audio's doing something weird. Okay, it seems to be gone. Sorry about that, I sound like a Darth Vader or something. So yeah, and I think also about, just move on to the points, because I think we bring this up, Christina brings up a lot of good points. Something also is that student might be confused. So the teacher might have explained it another way and they just got confused and didn't understand what the other teacher was saying. So, just understand that you want to kind of pull at the threads of why they're confused. So I think that goes with bullet point number 3. I'm a little bit out of order, but give the student plenty of time to talk. So figure out what the student's point of confusion is, and it may just be a semantic thing, the way you said things, or those kinds of things. Christina pointed out, try to save face for the other teacher. You don't know what they said. You're only interpreting through the student's limited knowledge. So don't ever say, the other teacher is wrong, because we don't know. And if the other teacher is wrong, we want to make sure that our teaching team looks strong anyway. So let them save face and just do something like Mercado Sensei mentioned, is like, oh, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. And then sometimes you just do have different teachers explain things differently. And recognize that it's not a challenge to your authority. It just is the student trying to figure things out in a difficult situation. And you can also go and find, I'm sure you can find things online or more drills and things like that, different types of explanations than even the one that you're used to getting, because it may clarify a bridge between what the previous teacher, how the previous teacher had done it and the way you've done it. So it could be different usages of the same grammar point. So for example, present continuous is not really present, really. It can be used for future, it can be used for different things. So it may have just been a different usage or in a unique case. So we never know what goes on in another class. So okay, how about case study 4? Bethany, did you guys do this one?
We did briefly. We touched
You guys
on
all
it.
do the illegal things in
I
your
know we couldn't
against
can't confine us. So we did discuss, though, a personal issue that I'm sure, again, many students experience, which is some type of physical, cognitive, medical related thing that might be happening with the student that instructors perceive there's a clear pattern of behavior that could potentially be interpreted as lack of motivation if the student comes back time and time again, not remembering, can't recall, needing to repeat the same topics over and over. And so what we discussed is, even though we do depend on teachers to linguistically diagnose what the student needs, it's certainly not the instructor's job to medically diagnose. So we do encourage to record patterns of behavior, seek help from the LTS, who then can contact the agency, who may or may not know of some additional information about that individual to then help in other ways that may not be able to occur in the classroom. So just know that you have options if that's happening. And also there are ways that the LTS can then meet with the student to have a safe, productive conversation about what needs to happen without, involving that the teacher, was the one revealing this information. That the LTS team can get a bit creative, having a impromptu, matter-of-fact check-in with the student, and then somehow coach the student to really reveal what the teacher then reported. So that's really what we focused on for this case study.
Okay, I think a lot of people in the beginning mentioned motivation, so this is a big one. If it is a motivation issue and you need to deal with it because that's where the student is, did anybody else talk about this in their group? Any volunteers?
Lori, do you want to repeat what you said?
Sure. I talked about that at the beginning of a class, or semester, I give a little sheet out to students and they have to write down something in their personal life that's interesting about them, whether it's a hobby or something else, so that even if they don't like the activity, I can try and use that to get them interested in a topic, or I can ask them about the things that they do outside of class, get them interested in communicating.
Okay, yeah, it's getting to know them more personally from the beginning to see, and then from those things, I think you can see what motivates them.
Right.
Anyway, even if it's not school related. So if you do this, then we can do this, or try to bribe them a little bit. If you do this activity, we'll do this something else fun or something like that, or bring candy too. I don't know what else works. But, anybody else have any that you talked about?
Well, we didn't talk about that, but I had a personal experience with motivation. One of my students he was a DLI student and he was supposed to learn ranks in military ranks. And in order to motivate him more, I said okay, so we'll see who will learn more than me in English or you in that language.
Make it a
And then-
competition.
Yeah, we made it exactly. We made a competition, and then like he won, so I invited him to lunch basically.
Good. It's a good plan. So yeah, there's lots of little tips and ideas. Dolly, were you going to say something or? No, maybe you were just moving around. Sorry, I thought I saw it. So, I think it comes down to what you guys were all saying, finding out what the problem is. So like Bethany talked about, it could be something totally different. It could be a cognitive problem, could be anxiety. It could be a previous bad experience that they had with language. It could be the materials of the book. You know, those are some things that are changeable. Maybe they don't like languages or learning, and then pulling on the things, you know, that they want. Maybe they can't get the application to the job. So when making it applicable to their job, so you could bring things in, you know, that what role play, what do you actually do in your job, or where would you need to give your name, even if it's a 0+, you know, what kinds of applicable activities would actually work, and you know, maybe do part of that, and then you have to go back and do the content even if they don't want to. But yeah, so some things, find materials based on their interests, have the student check, look for their own materials outside of class, you know, find out what the goals are, make sure they explicitly state those things, tell the student what you're doing each time. Sometimes if you say why you're doing something, they're more motivated to do it. In other cases, you know, you might want to talk to your LTS if you can rotate in with another class, maybe to, you know, bring more energy into the class with another super motivated student, you know, do group work, things like that. We're still doing group stuff online. So if you have a student who seems, you know, lethargic or whatever, see if you can get an hour or two a week to kind of get somebody else in the classroom and bring some energy in. So I think Alexandra, was trying not to ignore you, but I think you have your hand up, but it's, the application's a little bit weird. Did you want to say something?
Can I say something about this topic?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to mention that what I did in the past was, as a motivation, was as used real scenarios, as a life scenarios for people, that situation that they actually are in. And it's much easier for them to engage in a conversation and learn from it than something that is out of the book or something that is boring. So that was one thing for me to engage with them. And another thing was, I introduced my students to different games. Like they absolutely love Hanging Man game, because that was something that, you know, they thought at the beginning that it was so silly. You know, usually kids play that game, but adults don't normally play that. So for them, at the first time I introduced that, it was so funny and so silly that they started participating in it. And then as we progressed with the information and questions and answers and this and that, they actually started loving it. So I was like, I was always breaking the topics. I'm like, okay, it's time for a Hangman game, and let's do this right now. And they're like, oh my gosh, not again. And they were trying to be, you know, their mood completely shifted from, you know, learning the language, from talking about one particular topic that they had absolutely no interest in, and they needed to learn the vocabulary. We switched that, you know, thinking, and, you know, ultimately all the students were like, you know, having more energy, and, you know, one of them was losing, one of them was learning, winning, and it was fun. It was fun. And this is the way that, you know, people learn fast and they remember stuff, because they can be in the same situation. You know, it's a life situation, and it's a funny thing. And, you know, we're basing our learning based on emotions sometimes, and people, you know, adults or younger, with not ability to focus, like, you know, having ADHD, for example. And, you know, you can pick up, if you had experience with people with different medical diagnoses, you can pick up really quickly of who can or who cannot do that. And
yeah,
I think it's our job to introduce the language and the topics in a way that these people, people can understand and they can learn most from.
Yes, thank you. And I think that kind of harkens back to someone else said competition. Sometimes you don't know, maybe your student has a silly side, wants to do something, maybe they really like being serious and having serious conversations. So, you got to play with kind of the type of student that you've got and mixing it up as well. So, okay, so let's go to delayed feedback. Janet, did you guys stick to the rules or did you also break all the rules? You're
Don't
very
ever
rule-based.
make me a facilitator. We were worried about Elizabeth being in Florida with a hurricane outside. Yeah. So sorry.
So did you talk about this one?
No, we didn't get to. We talked about other cases. Sorry.
It's okay. Did anybody talk about this one? This one's an interesting one. If you guys didn't talk about it, that's fine. It's pretty, we can do this one really quickly. Yeah, I think this goes back to what we were talking about is not the bad behavior where we document it, but making sure you talk to the student a lot so that when it comes out, getting the LTS involved very early. If you think something is an issue early on, just making sure you pull somebody in or talk about it openly with the student so that it doesn't, you think everything's fine and then the student tells you, like you hear at the end, they've written something about the class that they didn't like and you were never aware of it. So I think as soon as something feels wrong, have a frank conversation with the LTS. They might be able to get a sense of why the student's like that. Maybe when the student entered, the LTS had a weird feeling and has some idea of the student's background or something like that. They can give you some insights. Just make sure you get frequent feedback from your student. We poll the students after 2 weeks after the class starts, we poll them every month. If they want to complain to us, we'll generally hear it through those, but we don't like looking at the end of the course evaluation and they haven't even sent those in, but we notify the teacher whenever we hear anything too. But if you guys can do it on a daily, weekly basis, maybe you take 10 minutes on Friday. What did you like? What didn't you like? And kind of force them to say something they didn't like because they're not going to feel comfortable talking to you necessarily. Yeah, this is Q&A. Maybe give a list of activities you did for the day and say, which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? Then you can ask, why was that your least favorite? And they can give you, maybe you find out more information. Yeah, that's the same. Make sure your student early on is connected to the LTS because people have different relationships. They might tell them something where the LTS can kind of give you some idea of what the student's thinking. Encourage them to be proactive. Of course, we send out those surveys. So every month you can ask them, hey, did you fill out your survey this month? Did you fill out your survey this month? It also helps you guys because we see it, and the more good feedback you guys get, the nicer and the more things we can propose and bid you on and all those things. And suggest to students that they should be proactive. If they need additional support or if they need anything. So we get all kinds of interesting feedback that we never know was even an issue. So if you can push your students also, that's really, really a nice thing. Okay, this was mine, so obviously I didn't follow the rules because I didn't go to a group, but somebody did it. I heard one group talking about it. So if one student, and I have seen this happen where one student's bad mouthing another teacher, it might go back to that grammar case study we had, but they're saying bad things, maybe a teacher at a different school as well, but the community is really small, we all know each other, so it can happen across schools as well, or even saying something bad about another school we don't particularly like that to happen either. But then I heard which group was talking about this? Valerie, your group?
Yeah, we did.
Do you want to tell me?
We
Give
said
us
that
some-
it doesn't happen very often, but it has happened in the past, and it makes us uncomfortable. And the better thing to do is to brush it off, to ignore it. Leah suggested to redirect, but sometimes we need to approach our LTS, and especially when the student has complained about non-ethical issues, like for example, the teacher not showing for class, or maybe asking some personal favors or anything that could hurt the school and the class.
Yeah, did anybody else talk about this situation?
Valentina?
Oh, okay. So as I mentioned during our discussion at Valeria group, so that's, for example, if it's something about but to their curriculum, for example, they are not up to the task at this moment, and that might be a problem, might be with the student, but the problem might be also live somewhere in between or with the teacher. And if I get if I'm a second teacher and I hear some complaints or bad mouthing from the student, then I might contact my LTS just to be sure that we are on track.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think you mentioned this also, the curriculum. Sometimes students badmouth the curriculum, and a lot of languages you don't have a lot of choice with the curriculum you choose to. So instead of making sure that you don't say anything bad about the curriculum, you kind of give them some context of why it is the way it is. Some students don't like task-based curricula and don't understand it, and you kind of have to explain this is why it is like this, and there's nothing you can do about the curriculum. I know like the Thai curriculum is pretty old, so they'll complain about it, and it's like, well, we can't build a whole new curriculum. It's the most appropriate for you, and do additions, supplements, and things like that. But sometimes the curriculum gets in the way, and if the teacher starts to point out negatives in the curriculum, it makes it kind of worse too.
Yeah, you're right. And usually curriculum has to like lead to the student to reach their own goals. So if they are preparing for OPI,
and no curriculum is perfect. There's just is never going to be perfect. So if
you're right. That's and no textbooks are perfect, and no teacher is perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Curriculum, in textbooks specifically,
and no teacher or no student is perfect.
Yes, nothing is perfect. Okay. So kind of some of the things we were thinking about, be really mindful, like Valerie said, just redirect. You don't want to risk spreading rumors about teachers and having any of that under the ground kind of feeling. You want to keep everything above board. You're professional, just sweep it under the rug. Don't unintentionally, to avoid conflict, be very careful of just like even nodding when somebody does something, because sometimes it makes it look like, oh yeah, I agree with you, and just be like, I'm not sure, make it known that you're not agreeing with them. So kind of we were thinking about some tools. I think like Valerie mentioned some redirections, but you can kind of just empathize with them and say, I can see you're upset. Maybe you should go talk to the LTS if you're upset, or I hear you, that's upsetting. But so it's kind of acknowledging that you hear them, but not actually agreeing with them. You can also just straight up say, hey, this is my colleague I've known for a while. Let's not talk about it here or whatever. Sometimes just go to the LTS, or I would suggest if you do hear something, sometimes it's just the teacher may not be the strongest teacher too, and may need more training, and bringing that to the LTS's attention, then the LTS can go and you don't get caught in the middle of all of that. So you can bypass the student to the LTS, and if the other teacher does need help, we can get them the help they need. And then, let them know they can give feedback to the LTS. That's part of the whole thing. So try to pull yourself out of that situation as much as possible so you don't look one way or the other. So that was the end of the case studies that we had. Just a quick sum up about what we talked about. Don't take things personally. You can't control what other people are doing. It may not even be about you. You know, it's like forgiving the guy who parked across the lines. You know, I don't know, maybe he's having a bad day and he had to park in the parking lot in a bad way. So give people the benefit of the doubt. Do your best to find out why. Try to be open and frank with the students as much as they're willing to be with you. You know, be flexible with materials. You know, you don't want the materials to stand in the way, as long as they, you know, as long as you see a use for them. Make sure you don't ignore any issues. Let us, you know, I hate to keep being like, tell the we're happy to hear anything. You know, we want to know everything that's going on because we can't be a little spy in every single class. So if you think something's wrong, just before it becomes an issue. So you don't want, you know, the wedge to go deeper and deeper if you do have some issues with that student. And again, like I talked about, if it's unethical, make sure you document it. If it's disrespectful, you know, these are also employees of the government. So they all, in the end, do work on, they have bosses. So we can do things about that. Oh, yeah. That's both the two last points are kind of the same. So that was, I think, the last slide. Yeah.